So grateful to Shomer Collective once again for gathering all of us together across the continent. There's so many Jewish doulas out there, and it's wonderful to be able in these moments, in these quarterly gatherings, to share a unique Jewish perspective on the work that we do every day with all of our clients, whether or not they're Jewish. And today we're going to be focusing on issues around food and drink. This I'm going to touch on a few different concepts, everything from the meaning of food in Jewish culture, the significance of food, to fasting in Jewish culture and spirituality, and then some of the specific doula issues that might come up for us with clients who are either unable to eat or drink or considering stopping eating and drinking, etc., or who have different delivery methods for getting artificial nutrition or nutrition. So the first thing I want to acknowledge is this quote that we've heard so many times that's a joke that's not really funny that says, they tried to kill us, we survived, now let's eat. So this, the humor of this is funny because we're survivors. And part of that survival is celebrating with food and drink that nourishes us and sustains us. And so for every holiday, we have our traditional foods. And every Jewish community has its own traditional foods, whether it's, European, Ashkenazi, or Mizrahi and Middle Eastern cuisines, Jewish cuisine around the world is so varied and so rich and wonderful. And the stereotype of the Jewish mother and the Jewish grandmother is that they provide food. They provide love and comfort through their chicken soup, through their special brisket recipe, through their special honey cake or apple cake or matzo brie, you name it. Um, and so there's something very precious and tender about the Jewish connection to food and how much comfort it brings. Not to mention, of course, bagels and um, this has really spread beyond the Jewish community to these are comfort foods for many North Americans, whether or not they're Jewish, which is just a further testament to the power of these foods and their sort of their lore and their mystique. So now I want to go to a kind of a difficult story about a couple that I had the privilege of working with um, around 2018. Um, this was a couple who were both in their 90s, both Holocaust survivors. There have been books and films made about Ben Stern. May his memory be a blessing. And I'd like to read a quote about Ben Stern. On April 3rd, 1945, Stern was one of the 7,000 boys that left Buchenwald on their death march. After 35 days of marching to the Tyrolean mountains, surviving on only 4 boiled potatoes each day, on May 3rd, 1945, Stern was liberated by the United States Army. Stern met his wife, Chaya Helen Kilmanowitz, in the Bergen-Belsen displaced persons camp following the end of the war. The two married 6 weeks later. By the end of World War II, Stern had survived 2 Jewish ghettos, 9 concentration camps, and 2 death marches in January and April of 1945. So I had the opportunity to work with this couple when Helen was dying. And as the very, very natural progression of her dying process, she died from natural causes, so did he, not too long after her. She stopped eating. She stopped eating and drinking. She just did not want to anymore. Her body was shutting down, as we know. But this was incredibly difficult for Ben to comprehend and to accept. He kept trying to feed her. He wanted her to be fed. Um, and so I came in and I talked with him and he started crying and he said, I can't believe that after what Helen and I survived, she is now dying of starvation. So from his perspective, her cause of death was starvation, and this was unbearable to him, being survivors of such deprivation. So I'm bringing this up because he was able to articulate this so clearly, but others might not. They might not even be conscious of it, especially if they're second generation um, Holocaust survivor families. You know, this is just something that's in people's DNA, in their collective history and intergenerational trauma. So I know that this group would understand that story and find it particularly poignant. Obviously, I did education with him around the natural dying process and tried to give him as much comfort as I could. And I think he did come to understand that this was not death by starvation, but just the body slowly shutting down. You know, our clients, they get so much joy and pleasure from eating, right? It's one of the last remaining pleasures for many people who are ill. If they can't leave the house or they're bedbound, hopefully they can still enjoy delicious tasting food. Um, and yet, as we know, there's many instances where a feeding tube is necessary or there's dietary restrictions, lots of reasons why maybe people can't eat solid food anymore as they're dying. So we can get creative. We can offer them little tastes, little sips. We can even put something on their lips, like an orange or a tangerine juice on their lips, a strawberry. Just a couple of weeks ago, I worked with a client who was a total wine aficionado. And as she was in her final days, I said to her friends who were gathering around her bedside, you know, let's play some of her favorite music. She was nonverbal at this point, practically nonverbal. Let's play some of her favorite music. And why not bring out a bottle of wine? Even if she can't have any, let's all do it. Why don't you all do a toast to her? Well, the last words that she said turned out to be more wine. And so what her friends did is they opened a bottle of wine and put some on her lips, and she a few times said, more wine. And they put a few more drops on her lips. And so together they had a final toast and played Sting, the music of Sting, who was her absolute favorite artist. And that turned out to be an impromptu sort of ritual, goodbye ritual for her before she lost consciousness. I had another client a few years ago who had a feeding tube and was not eating any food by mouth, but she asked her daughter to promise her that the last thing that she would experience in this life was coffee ice cream. And it happened. It was the middle of the night. Her daughter was there with her. She was at the very end, her final breaths. They brought out the coffee ice cream, put some in her mouth, and she died a few minutes later with that taste, with that wish being fulfilled. Okay. I want to move on now to what happens with so many people that we work with, that they need some type of feeding tube, or they come to this juncture of should I have one or not? And sometimes by the time we meet them as doulas, they already have. a tube in their stomach, a tube through their nose, a tube in their chest. I am not a medically trained provider, so I've done my own research about all these different tubes that I would hear about, the PEG tube, the G tube, the NG tube, total or partial parenteral nutrition. Recently had two clients with this TPN, and it's a delivery method of nutrients directly to the vein that completely bypasses the whole digestive system. One of them had appendix cancer and the other colon cancer. So you may come across this. I'm sure you've also come across clients who are on a strictly pureed diet, which can be really kind of nasty and yucky, especially when you like start pureeing their meat and their other foods that just are lose all their appetizing qualities when they're pureed. I hate to see at nursing facilities when a whole meal, the entree, the appetizer, the salad are pureed together and fed to the residents. That just makes me really sad. Um, and I'm sure you've come across the drinks, the shakes, the thickeners, Ensure, Cape Farm. Um, some people enjoy them. Some people really think they ta are tasty and they ask for them, and others just try to kind of choke them down. And yeah, it can be tough. So let's talk a little bit in thinking about helping our clients come to a decision-making process, whether it's the patient themselves or their family member who's making medical decisions for them, whether or not to stop nutrition or to stop eating and drinking altogether as a means of hastening death. Let's talk about fasting in Jewish culture and tradition and spirituality. So it turns out that there are 25 Jewish holidays and events throughout the year associated with the tradition of fasting at some point in Jewish history. Yom Kippur is the only one that's commanded, the others are voluntary. It's also possible or permitted to do a private fast for spiritual reasons. And here's one quote. Fasting on Yom Kippur can be a source of joy and spiritual fulfillment rather than just a form of deprivation. So this is just something to reflect on, the nature of fasting. Is it only deprivation, or is it also a way to put aside worldly concerns and material concerns of the body in order to focus on our spiritual life and our spiritual growth? We talk about refuah shlema, healing of body, healing of spirit. Refuah shlema means complete healing, a healing that brings wholeness. And many of us, as doulas, know that even when healing of the body is no longer possible, there still is the possibility of healing of spirit. So fasting can be part of this. I also want to mention the body as a temple. And I found this really cool quote that will be in all of this will be in your source sheet. Before we can grasp the significance of kashrut, we need to understand the Jewish approach to eating and life itself. Put simply, we are here to transform the physical realm into a place that God can call home, meaning our bodies. Of course, a home must be consistent with the will and design concept of its inhabitant. So in making the world God's home, we are the interior designers, and every aspect of our life is an element in the divine abode. So one way that we can talk to our clients about nutrition and eating and drinking and the stopping of eating and drinking is we can introduce this concept of our bodies as a temple for the divine. And if we're purifying the body, if we're sort of clearing out the body and bringing spaciousness to our digestive system and our organs, that maybe that makes some more space for spiritual healing to come in. And thus the song that we played in the beginning by Batya Levine, may I be empty and open to receive the light. May I be full and open to receive. I want to just quickly end with introducing to anyone who hasn't heard of the concept of VSED. I just want to put it out there that people who are interested in hastening their death and do not qualify for medical aid in dying, either because it's illegal in their state or they otherwise don't qualify, there is the option to voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And I wanted to make sure that everyone here at least knows about that. I will end there. And thank you for giving space for this important conversation. I know each of you has stories to share and questions to ask.